Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar, which is titled Protecting Your Business and Employees During the Pandemic. Obviously, we're all living in challenging times. At MHA Tait Walker, we've had multiple conversations with our business clients of what we can be doing to support both them as a business and their employees during this pandemic. If we can go to the next slide. We have had one question that's come in prior to this webinar, but I would ask you, if you have got any questions, there is a chat function, which is the speech bubble icon on your screen, and we aim to answer any of the questions that come in at the end of this session. Next slide, please. Okay, so the speakers that we've got today, my name's Mark Parkinson. I'm a partner at MHA Tait Walker Wealth Management. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then I'll be handing over to Adam Aldred, who is a business development consultant with UNUM, and he's going to do an introduction to a range of employee benefits and group products. Adam will then hand over to Paul Craven, who is a protection specialist with Vitality, and is going to run through a business protection case study scenario, which really does bring to life the importance of considering business protection. And then Paul will hand over to Amanda Stevens, who's going to talk about private medical insurance, and Amanda's from Aviva. And obviously in the current climate, we've had many conversations with clients and employers that have been inquiring about the merits, the costs, the value adding, I guess, of bringing private medical insurance to their employees. So a real brief overview of MHA Tait Walker Wealth Management. MHA Tait Walker is a chartered accountancy practice. We employ around 165 members of staff. Within the wealth management team, there's 30 of us. So there's 13 advisors, and Ian Marsh, who is on this session today, is one of the 13 colleagues who, and Ian's role is employee benefits consultant and specialises in this market. The corporate areas that Ian specialises in on behalf of his clients, employers, are group personal pensions linked to the auto enrolment market, business protection, private medical care, and death and service. And it's worth pointing out we are completely independent. We've got no ties to any organisation, so we are whole of market. Next slide, please. Briefly, Tait Walker are part of an MHA network, which is 8 member firms across the UK. We're completely independent of each other than the fact that as a network, we are able to share resource, share expertise on behalf of our clients. And that gives us a UK coverage, if you like, with 50 offices across the UK. And the next slide will explain not only, as I mentioned, MHA Tait Walker, we have got offices across the north. I've mentioned already that we have got the national presence with the MHA network, but being part of the MHA network in the UK, that gives us access to an international network, which is Baker Tilly, which gives us access to global specialists if our clients need that expertise. So that's it from me. I'm now going to hand over to Adam Aldred, who is the business development consultant at UNUM. Over to you, Adam.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm going to be talking about employee benefits, and we're going to look at group protection products and group protection solutions, otherwise known as group risk to those in the industry. So next slide, please. So brief agenda, we're going to look at what are employee benefits, but in the context of group risk. Just look very briefly at what each individual product looks like: group income protection, group life, group critical illness. We're going to include a little bit about corporate dental as well, although not traditionally a group risk product. There's a reason we've entered that market. And then we're going to look at added value solutions that sit around employee benefits these days, not just with us, but with various providers. And they're really being grasped upon at the moment, and we're seeing more and more businesses using those, and they're sometimes even the primary reason for putting employee benefits in place now. So can we have the next slide, please? So employee benefits in the group risk context. Well, I mentioned on the agenda, we've got income protection, group life and group critical illness cover. Now, in most cases, the business or the employer pays for this cover for the benefit of their employees. So a business is spending some money on employee benefits and on group protection because they're so critical, they're so core, and the employees then benefit from having that great protection. And there are other funding options as well, but what you're going to find in most cases is the business, the company that's spending the money on the premium. But there are other solutions, and they're growing, where the employer creates the environment, they work with specialists and create the environment for the employee education, and the employee pays for the cover, but they do it in a very informed environment where they know what they're buying, hopefully, they know why they're getting protection, they know why it's important. And there are other, again, more rare, but maybe in the future becoming more commonplace, is where there's a combination. So where the business puts some money into the pot to buy the benefits. And for those employees that feel that their lifestyle or whatever it may be do require higher levels of cover or different types of cover, they can then pay some of the premium towards that themselves. So next slide, please. So why would a business do this? Very often a good question that I'd be asking myself. Well, in the main, and what I tend to hear these days when I ask the question as to why someone's looking at this, it's for recruitment and retention, because the battle for talent is there, and to get that person that you've identified through various interview processes and to say, right, we want to offer you the job, and for them to have a second thought and for decide not to take you up on the offer because your benefits offering just wasn't there for them. Perhaps they're working for a larger organisation where they've got some fantastic benefits in place, and it was just a step too far, a risk they couldn't take. They loved your business, they loved what you had to say, but they just couldn't do it because you were losing a lot. It's also good for staff retention as well, because people do have second thoughts before they leave a business. They do have second thoughts and they do reflect on what they've got these days. I think employees are far more sophisticated than they were in the past and do look back at the benefits. I certainly have done. You know, I we're in a very competitive environment in the career that I've chosen, but I stick around with the company that I work for because fantastic benefits package you did expect. Now, it also can reduce sickness absence as well, because the added value services can prevent absence happening in the first place, or certainly reduce the length of it if they're undertaken. So again, saving the business some money there, because people want the staff back at work. And the key thing here is to increase productivity. Happy employees are going to work harder for your business. They just are. We all know that's the case. So how do you create a happy employee? Maybe some jobs are relatively dull, that's a fact. You can't really do much about that, but you can create a fantastic environment to work in. And that includes having great benefits, to know that you love and care about your employees and for them to sort of feel that. And they'll work harder for you. So benefits are a way to lift the spirit of an organisation typically and make employees realise what a fantastic company it is to work for. And the very tax efficient benefits as well. Naturally, you have to go deeper into the advice, but in a lot of cases, in the majority of cases, the spend on employee benefits can be offset against your business expenses. So they're very tax efficient. Next slide, please. So what is group income protection? Well, it pays a percentage of someone's salary for a period of time after a period of time. So, for example, it could pay 75% of an employee's salary through to the state pension age after perhaps 6 months has elapsed. And there are other variations where the benefit term can be limited. So there's lots of ways you can build a benefits package to fit any required budget. And when you look at what the key reasons people are going off sick these days in the medium to longer term, and that is, should be no surprise, it's cancer. It's mental health, and naturally in the current environment we know people are struggling even more perhaps than they were before. So, and musculoskeletal conditions as well, you know, bad backs, aches and pains, and not to be underestimated. You know, when you're in pain, it can be very distracting. It can affect your mood, so you're not really going to be working as hard as you possibly could because you're in pain. So you should be off work and getting better. And I think when you look at COVID environment, mental health and musculoskeletal, people aren't moving around as much and people are struggling. So good reason for income protection there. Next slide, please. And then death in service, or group life as we call it, that's very traditional, and you find that a lot of businesses already have that in place. I certainly would expect it at a minimum. If I was going looking for work, I would be asking that question. And effectively it's just a lump sum payable to some trustees who then pass it on to beneficiaries. So it's usually a deceased employee's loved ones, it's usually their family, so they know if they have an untimely death that the loved ones can be cared for. And if you think about the cost of a funeral in the UK is running up now to nearly £9,400, you find a lot of businesses, and certainly smaller businesses, might feel that they want to help the families because they might know them a bit. So and that's a staggering amount of money to try and find, to bury somebody or have a funeral for somebody. And group death in service can take care of that. Next slide, please. And group critical illness, this is something that's just not spoken about enough, and it is the fastest growing employee benefit at the moment, certainly is within our organisation. I've tried to understand why that is. I just think it's becoming focused more. It is affordable, it's one of the more affordable ones. It's just not spoken about enough. But effectively, if an employee suffers a defined list of critical illness events, then there's a lump sum payable to them, usually a multiple of salary or a flat amount of cover. And when you think there's over 100,000 hospital admissions attributed to heart attacks in the UK every year, there's 125,000 people of working age that are diagnosed with cancer every year. Within any size organisation, there is going to be probably an event where the employee needed to be looked after, and what a brilliant benefit, what a great way to show your employees you care, to let them know that you've got their back. Next slide, please. And then corporate dental, although not traditionally a group protection product and moving more to the healthcare, we'd be remiss not to include this at the moment because it is a growing benefit. That's why as a business we added this to our portfolio, because it's quite a lively market and there's a lot more people putting it in place, a lot more companies putting in place. And the reason that is people will use it, employees will use it, they'll use it frequently, they'll think what a great company this is to work for, we've got this dental cover. It reminds employees that they're working for a fantastic organisation that's thinking about their needs. So that's why corporate dental is there. It's low cost, high value, highly transactional cover. Next slide, please. But we'd have to talk about added value services, because you're going to find this across the employee benefits marketplace. And group protection very much has really upped the game in recent years, and that's accelerating in terms of value. So if you just look across the slide here, you'll see something on my top left says vocational rehabilitation services. So that means there's a bunch of people around the UK that come from health background, nursing backgrounds, helping people back to work all the time, understanding why people are struggling going back to work and working with employers and working with them to get them back to work. It's a win-win for everyone. The employer gets a valued staff member back, the valued staff member gets back behind the desk or working in the job that they were doing before where they belong, and insurance companies claims are slightly lower, so everyone wins. So it's a really good resource. Then you've got a thing called cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT, which is a kind of a mindfulness thing that insurers can then invoke to help employees that are struggling with mental health issues to think differently about the world. That's a very simplistic view of that, but just to know that support is there, and all this is at no extra cost. All this comes with group protection. We're working with charity partnerships such as Maggie's, who are a cancer partnership, so we can create seminars, and we do inviting businesses along to understand what cancer in the workplace looks like. So, we're just helping employers look through that lens about what health issues, what health and well-being can look like and what solutions that can be. There's early intervention helplines, where if the business feels that they can get the staff member back to work rather than using an insurance company's vocational rehab consultants, but they just want a bit of help, a hand, holding hand. Are we doing the right thing? Any suggestions? Are we going down the right route? This is the situation. What would you do? There's a helpline there, and you are speaking to those vocational rehab consultants. These are experts that pay good money. They're a very expensive resource, and it comes with it. Employee assistance programs, and we're going to have a slide shortly about that, which I'll expand on secondly. Mental health first aid. You know, insurance companies can get deals these days. So if you believe that you want some mental health training for your line managers, speak to an insurance company if you have a group protection product with them, because they might be able to get you a bit of deal and save you some money. And then there's apps. I mean, we're all about apps these days. But we've introduced an app that's a health and wellbeing app. So if you want a GP appointment within 2 hours, get one. If you want mental health support up to 8 sessions a year, you can have that. If you want physio because you're not exercising like me, because I'm stuck in my house all day these days, physio support, press your button on your phone and get it. Second opinions, they're a big thing at the moment. You know, people are getting diagnosed with awful things, they've been given a treatment program, they're not that confident, they've just not got that confidence it's the right thing to do. They can get a second opinion, all through a very, very easy to use app. And some of those services go beyond the employee. The GP service, for example, goes to the employee's partner and the children. Wow. The mental health support goes to the partner. The physio goes to the partner as well. The second opinion goes to the children and partner too. So you can, the employee benefits light, if you like, is shining out past that employee and into the family environment. So if people are thinking of leaving, the family say, don't leave that company, we've got some great benefits here. It does work. Next slide, please. And then employee assistance programs, a big piece of added value, kind of one of the first ones that entered the landscape. I mean, you can buy these separately. They're still fantastic if that's what you decide to do as an organisation. But just to know they come part of a group protection offering as well. So it's a safe environment for people to solve life's problems or crises. So for example, there's counselling in an EAP. So if an employee is really struggling with something, they can get counselling by making a phone call to the employee assistance programme. There's legal support in there. So if an employee's got a neighbour dispute or a parking ticket, I don't care what it is, they can get some legal advice from it. Let's say there's a substance abuse problem that the employee is not tackling, they can get some help with that. You know, maybe they've got an illness that you want to know more information about. They can get some content on that, they can get some advice. But it's not all bad news as well. It's not all about solving life's difficult problems. It's not all about sort of solving crises. If you're thinking about some wellness, you'll think taking exercise, eating better, there's information on there as well. Line managers have their own special line because their job is very difficult because they're dealing with the most complex thing on earth, which is people, and they need support and a different kind of support, and they can get it through the employee assistance programme. There's childcare referrals and elder care referrals, which means employees can give the wish list to the EAP and they can come back with some results, saving that employee taking time out from work doing that. That's a very short version. So think about EAPs, they're very in-depth and they're growing quickly and they come as part of group protection. So next slide, please. And that is me, really. It's short and sweet, but hopefully it's giving you an idea of what group protection looks like in the workplace, health and wellbeing generally, and what employers are starting to look at. So I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Paul Craven from Vitality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. So yes, Paul Craven, Protection Specialist with Vitality Life. This has been a really strange year for all of us, and we've had to consider things that we never thought we were going to have to consider back in January. So our health, our well-being, our business resilience, and cash flow of our businesses. So just go to the next slide. So just what I want to look at is a couple of different parts. A case study, just to kind of look at when things really go wrong, and this is a real life example, and as well as identifying some of the risks and some of the solutions to consider that you could speak to Tait Walker about. So if you just go to the next slide. So AMT Coffee. So AMT Coffee is a very successful kind of coffee on the go firm. You'll have seen them in Newcastle train station, Glasgow, all the way down to London. They are huge. 3 brothers founded this firm back in the 90s. And, you know, by the 2000s, this firm is worth millions. Just go to the next slide, please. Now, unfortunately, Angus dies at age 45. Now, this is a family business, 3 brothers working really closely together. You would assume, as a family business, they would be looking after the widow. But there are some other things you also need to think about. What happens to Angus's shareholding in this business? What impact is that going to have on the profit of the business, the ability to repay their debts, and future plans for the business? I mean, were they hoping to sell out to someone like Starbucks or Costa's? So there's some big considerations that you need to look at of what would win a family business and the business will, which seems to be missing for many businesses. If we move to the next slide, please. Now, sadly, they did not look after Lucy, Angus's widow. They paid her about £120,000 worth of the pension fund that was due back to her. The business had excellent liquidity, and then what we actually see is they strip out as much of the profit from the business as they can through increased salaries, through big informal loans for themselves, and the absolute, the Christmas party piece, brand her a gold digger in court, which, happy families. Now, thankfully, there are laws around to protect people like Lucy, who is now a minority shareholding of the business. So she was able to pursue this legally and go all the way through to the High Court. But think about all the legal costs, all the legal expense that's taken to get to that point. They held in her favour, which meant that the court was able to award Lucy that she should be bought out at full market value, which is about £7 million. If you just move to the next slide, please. So she did find, proper remedy, but you just click for the next one. Angus actually died in 2006, and this only reached a final decision within the High Court in the early part of 2019. So it took 13 years. So my question at this point is, what has Lucy and her family been living on for the past 13 years whilst they've been having to fund this expensive legal action when they only received £120,000? Is this what Angus expected to have happened, a few months before his untimely departure? Now, a business will shareholder protection would have resolved all of this, and the cost would have been significantly less than these punitive legal fees. If you just go to the next slide. So we thought this was all finished in 2019. We thought this was a great example of why owners of businesses need to think about the succession planning and the exit strategy from their businesses. And then we see this headline, and we then find out the brothers have still yet to pay Lucy any money. They were due to pay her £1.5 million as a first instalment. They haven't done so, and now she's pushing again against them. And these actions can drive businesses to bankruptcy. So you've then got to think about all the other aspects to this, not just the cost, not just the family people, but also like the reputational damage. These people have hit the headlines. If you Google AMT Coffee widow, you will find solicitors, accountants, and the newspapers all commenting on this. And is that what you would want for your own business? So that is a really unusual example, because most people's legal defence would say settle out of court, don't let it go this far. And it could have all been fixed by just some forward planning and thinking about what could happen if someone was prematurely died or if someone suffered a very sudden illness. So we want to explore some of the other problems. If you just click to the next slide, please. So if you just click on again. So, when I'm saying what were Lucy and the children surviving on at that time? So a relevant life plan is very similar to what Adam was talking about, where death in service, relevant life plans enjoy the same tax benefits as a death in service plan. The difference is they are a fully underwritten solution, but it does allow a business to select who they want to cover in a more selective approach that you might not wish to do within a group arrangement. Just click to the next slide, please. So they're very similar, but it's just an individual single life death in service policy. And the next slide, you could use these if you want to provide family protection, you maybe want to top up those benefits for your death in service, or you just want to offer it to a few chosen people rather than offering it to your wider employee workforce because you're managing your costs. So there's the death in service, the family protection. If you just click to the next one, please. We then need to think about, the other aspect. And, I think what we've seen this year through the pandemic, cash is king, cash flow. And just if there's a change in cash flow, how that can have a crippling effect on all businesses. And how do you then maintain the profit and you keep up your loan and debt repayments? So just click to the next one. And we know what it is. We know we need to make sure our income, our revenue is going to outweigh all our expenditures. And if that shifts in the other direction, then we've got a really scary predicament. And that's how we've seen many highly leveraged businesses on the high street start to leave us. Just click to the next one. And so often with people are protecting things like their data, but that can be easily stored off-site. They're protecting kind of the tables, the chairs, the laptops, and they're insuring against lots of things. But the key thing, what we've realised now is people can work remotely. You can suddenly switch to people working at home. The problem we would have is, and just the next one, please, is actually how do you replace the people? Because it's people that are actually driving your profit. You as an owner or your key employees, they are the talent, they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they're the leadership, they're the relationships. How easy is it to replace those? If you just click to the next one. Because the impact of not having those key people around can have this circle of doubt, this negative impact on your business. If you've put your own money into your business as a director's loan, that's repayable back to your family on demand if the owner died. So again, cash flow issues. Banks have lent money to people, not to businesses. How do you service those repayments? Banks, lenders, they don't put insurance in place, but what they do ask for, personal guarantees, second charges, so the individuals have been impacted as well. And just the fact profit has dropped. Again, how is this going to impact your future plans for the business going forward? So there's lots of things we need to consider going forward. And finally, just click through to the next one. Kind of the great the example that we saw at the beginning, AMT Coffee. The needs that they had there for shareholder protection. Just click to the next one. What we could see in that case studies, we could see that the shares passed through to Lucy, his wife, but did she actually want to be involved in that business? Clearly the brothers, there's no love lost there, but could she sell those shares? Who is the chosen market? Well, clearly it was the two brothers, but for whatever reason they didn't want to buy them. So what do they want to happen? So the absence of that business will, the absence of the shareholder agreement, the absence of having a conversation sooner rather than later has left them with expensive legal action, and it could potentially lead to the end of a very successful business. And equally for the other people in the business, they clearly just wanted to sort of say goodbye to Lucy. They could have done it in a much nicer way by just handing over the cheque for £7 million and having absolute control of the business and driving it forward. So there's lots to think about. I really did kind of drive through that one quite quickly, but it's just little nuggets to think about. I think now is a really good time to have a conversation with Tait Walker, discuss the risks you are willing to shoulder as a business owner or a decision maker, and then think about the decisions you would rather pass over. And they can help you with that. So thank you very much, and I'll pass over to Amanda and Private Medical.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm Amanda Stevens, and I'll be talking about company private medical insurance. Next slide. So what is private medical insurance? Private medical insurance is designed to pay for the treatment of acute, so that's curable conditions that occur when a policy is taken out. It covers inpatient treatment, so that's where you would stay in hospital overnight or longer. Day patient treatment, where some time is spent recovering, but you don't actually need to spend the night there. And then we have outpatient too. That includes pre and post treatment appointments relating to a condition. And this can include things like your diagnostic tests, like your CT scans, your MRI scans too. Next slide. So currently in England, the NHS do a fantastic service with the treatment and the diagnostics that they provide. And I think this really relates to where we are with the COVID times, that we're seeing that even with them advertising an 18-week wait, we're seeing the impacts come through where actually the times are taking significantly longer for even some of the most routine kind of procedures that take place. So on the left hand side are three areas or three procedures that are performed in hospitals. And on the right hand side, I've used a Newcastle hospital where we would normally see an average wait time of probably between 18 to 20 weeks, that we're seeing wait times of up to 48 weeks. Now, if you have a member of staff that is potentially waiting for one of those procedures, they may not even be in work, or if they are in work, they may not have the ability to do the job that they're there to do. So it can have a significant effect on your business. And it is quite standard across those procedures. I know with the hernia it's slightly less, but even down to the lower back surgery, 48 weeks again. And I would imagine that from where we're at now, we will still see these increase in time. Next slide, please. So can your business afford not to have private health cover? So these are really just some official statistics around what we see with employees. Now, we see in general that somebody or a member of staff would be sick for around 4.4 days a year. And with an average full-time earnings of around £585 a week, that equates to around £479.70 in lost salaries. So obviously, the larger the company spend that you have, this could actually mean a significant amount of money that is going to be paid out for by the business. So on, say, a team of 50, around 220 days lost, and that's just under £24,000 in salaries paid. And the next slide, please. So the key benefits from having private health cover, it's a great way of absence managing. Really, any employee absence can have a significant impact on your business. And really, by having this in place, it just means that if you have a member of staff that is injured or becomes unwell, that they can get back to work quickly. So it's limiting the effect on the business. It's a tax deductible business expense under the current tax rules. It improves staff retention. We all like to feel valued, and this benefit can help to retain staff as they know their health will be looked after, and if they are caught up in high waiting lists, that they're going to be able to get seen quickly, and the cover can also be extended to their families. It's easy to set up and administer. There's no forms, there's a form to complete, but no medical exams need to take place, so it's really easy and straightforward to put in place. And you can also choose the levels of cover depending on budgets, that we can have different options to bring the price down or to increase levels of cover. Next slide, please. So I've pulled 3 parts of the policies that we see are really the three main parts, as well as your day patient, your outpatient, and your inpatient. So cancer cover for us is really important. It comes as standard, and we offer a really comprehensive cover. I think everyone's aware of the statistics that get used around the cancer at the moment, with like every 2 minutes someone being diagnosed with cancer and 1 in 2 people developing cancer in their lifetime. So it's obvious why it becomes a real key driver in making sure that you have the right things in place. Now, just as an example of cancer costs with Aviva, one of the active members that we still have on our books from last year, their treatment cost was around £1.2 million. So that's from seeing consultants to getting treatment that they're needing, and any follow-up treatments and everything that they're needing as well. And our average cancer claim is around £100,000. So we cover from the smaller cancers like the skin cancers, really up to the really extreme cases, and we want to make sure that we're there to cover them from the start to the finish of their treatment, and then onwards with checkups and everything afterwards. Next slide. So as it was mentioned earlier on, we do see musculoskeletal conditions featuring in our top 10 reasons for insurance claims. And these musculoskeletal conditions, back, neck, muscle, joint pain, are really common amongst employees. So what we have is what we call a back to better service, which means that if you had an employee that needed to speak to someone or needed treatment for one of these musculoskeletal conditions, they wouldn't need to see a GP. They would just need to call through to a customer services helpline. At that point, they would then be assessed, and whether it was exercises they needed or whether it was the need for a physio, that we can arrange that so that the employee can get back to see a physiotherapist very quickly and back to work. If a physio isn't all they need, and it's seen that maybe they would need a specialist to be involved in further treatment, then we would also be able to intervene in that and make sure that the employee was on the right pathway to make sure they had a really quick quality outcome. Next slide, please. And again, as it's been mentioned earlier, outpatient mental health benefit comes within our policies. So it just means that there is a way of making sure that you can intervene early, and an employee is going to be easily able to see a psychotherapist or be able to put on the cognitive-based therapy treatment pathway, and we have that included in the policy on a GP referral. At the back end of last year, we did a workplace research survey. So we went out to over 1,000 employers and 2,000 employees, and the results of that were really surprising. Over 92% of employees reported a mental health symptom, and a high number of businesses were recording higher absences due to mental health. And you can see there that some of the symptoms around there are, you know, stress, trouble sleeping and mood swings. And so the hope is that we can get early intervention to make sure that your employees are supported with their mental health. Next slide, please. So along with those, that we do see some added value benefits. So we have discounts from gyms to make sure that your employees have access to those and to keep fit and healthy. 24-hour stress counselling helpline, so they have the access there to support they may need. We also have a way of being able to claim online. And again, as mentioned earlier with apps, we have an app where there is the ability to be able to see a GP very quickly. So if an employee was maybe ill and wasn't able to get into work and they were struggling to get a doctor's appointment, we would expect they would be able to go onto an app and get an appointment very quickly to make sure that they were able to get whether it was a prescription or a referral on. And again, back to better. And next slide, please. So if you need anything, please contact Tait Walker. They'll be able to provide you a quote or any more information that you need. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you to Adam and Paul for a really good presentation. Hopefully brought some of the subjects to life. We're now going to open up the webinar for any questions. I briefly introduced Ian Marsh at the beginning. So Ian Marsh is an employee benefits consultant at MHA Tait Walker. He looks after in the region of 150 of our clients, employer clients, and is an expert in the areas of group pensions, death and service cover, private medical cover. So Ian, I believe you've got one question that's already come in.
Have I gone live? Yep, there we go. The question we had was, would the flu jab be recommended good practice? I can only say logically, yes, it would be. Obviously, we've got the vaccine situation coming up as well, and that's a conversation for another day probably. But certainly from a flu jab point of view, if you don't get it automatically through the NHS, it is readily available privately. I had it done myself at a local Boots the Chemist. I think it was £13.99. So it's not a difficult thing to get hold of. So yeah, I would say go and get it done. It's better to have it than not, certainly.
Thanks, Ian. I'm not sure, Sam, do we have any other further questions?
I don't think we've had any questions through.
Okay, so obviously if there is any questions that people that have attended today and they would like to have a discussion with Ian Marsh, then Sam's there, shared the details on the screen, and please contact Ian directly and he will be able to assist. And that really just leaves me thanks once again to everybody that's attended today's webinar, and also thanks once again to Adam, Paul and Amanda for their support in the detailed presentations. Take care everybody, and thanks for coming on.